not winning your gunfights, you may be bringing the wrong guns into battle. While we're all at the mercy of RNG and you can't expect a specific gun every match, you can expect to pick up at least one gun per weapon class if you want to achieve similar results. Each gun has its own perks. I made a whole guide on each gun, stabilizers, stocks, basically how every gun operates and how they're impacted. But you're not going to land long-range engagements with short-range guns, and you're not going to do your best if you aren't setting yourself up from early game. You need to know different guns, the different gun classes, and what you're getting yourself into first. We all have different playstyles, and by the way, that's not a bad thing. That should be applauded. It's what keeps Apex Legends diverse. We can't all just land at estates and mop the floor with the P2020 we found on the floor right off rip. This is going to teach you how to set up your late game by seeking out the right gun class, and right now, I'm going to help you figure out which one works best for you. Before you make a decision, keep in mind that DPS or damage per second isn't the only stat that matters, although people often fixate on that as the primary reason to pick up a certain gun over another. We're going to be looking at the following: RPM, DPS, headshot damage multiplier, magazine size, hipfire capability, playstyle, ADS move speed reduction, and reload times. Also, please note that I'm not in the firing range like I usually am with these explainer videos, because this one just felt a lot more natural to read the script as I had written it and my organized thoughts, and it doesn't feel quite as good to just show you different guns in the firing range. Instead, I'm just going to be showing background clips from what I've done in the game, some of my better moments, and they may not match up exactly with what classification that I'm reading off. However, I will still have relevant information and graphics on screen so that you have something to take home with you when you're all done watching this video. Okay, let's start with assault rifles. They're designed to be used from mid-range, although you'd be surprised to find out how effective most of them are at hip firing in close quarters. Compared to SMGs in close-range situations, they're going to hit harder, but normally shoot slower, so you'll have to look at individual weapon statistics to find the best bet for you. For example, the R99 has a 1080 RPM for a total body DPS of 198, but the R301 has a lower RPM of 810 and a lower body DPS of 189. Well, what if you don't need to deal 189 damage? What if your opponent has white shields or blue shields? What ifs can be a real pain, and they're gonna be all over the place. This game depends on luck. It depends on RNG. You can't predict everything. You can set yourself up the best possible way early game, and for many people, assault rifles kind of hit that sweet spot. You have to look at the bigger picture. An R99 may hit a higher DPS, but at mid-range, it's harder to control. An R301 also has a much higher headshot multiplier. One R301 headshot is equivalent to 2.5 R99 body shots. So when you balance the DPS that way, if you could hit your shots really well, you can still come out on top with the R301. The R301's magazine sizes aren't that much bigger, but the base mag size of 18 shots deals more damage for what you get than the base amount that an R99 has. So without any attachments, the R301 still wins and is more viable off drop if you have the option. Earlier I said that different playstyles should be applauded, and they should be. Not everyone has the hand-eye coordination or the crazy reaction time and speed, myself included by the way, I've been playing this game since it came out, to hit SMG shots and not miss a single bullet to just one clip everyone. There are some insane players out there, and the SMG meta is going to benefit them more than the assault rifle meta will, and that's okay. The low RPM of these assault rifles can actually help players who seem to not hit as many shots or have more difficulty tracking opponents, because you're not blowing your entire magazine, your ammo supply, and having to deal with that reload time all the time like you do with SMGs. So if you're hitting your shots because of the lower RPM and being able to not spend your whole mag, it's beneficial. There are other things to consider. As I said, DPS, RPM, they're not the only things here. Assault rifles in general have a 50% ADS move speed reduction, whereas SMGs have around a 15%. I know I'm comparing assault rifles and SMGs quite a bit, but this is usually how it comes down in game. You're going to pick one or the other. If hip firing isn't your strong suit and you feel the need to ADS to hit your shots, an SMG means you can move more, while an assault rifle's increased damage per shot comes at a sacrifice of movement. Do you have excellent movement, or at the very least, do you hip fire often? Assault rifles are good for hip firing, so you're good either way with these. But if you mostly ADS, even in close range gunfights, an assault rifle may end up doing you dirty. Train with automatic assault rifles from 25 to 35 meters away with a 2x or a 3x scope on them for maximum viability. Even if you aren't hitting enough shots to down an opponent, you can hit them hard and trap them in a slowdown field effect if you're using, say, the R301 or the flatline, possibly breaking their shields, and then you can mop them up with another gun type or make a team play to move in on that position. Let's take a look at SMGs. SMGs complement good movement. A lot of fights are close range, so inevitably, you're going to run into teams that run SMGs all day, sometimes dual SMGs, and yes, I've done it too. So what do you need to know about them to determine if you're good with them? Well, they normally have high RPMs, and that, in this instance, goes to the forefront because if you can't hit your shots, like I mentioned before, the high RPM is actually going to seriously hurt you. The higher RPM is a blessing to players with fantastic aim mechanics, but if you miss even half of your shots, you're being hit with that full reload time as you empty your mag out, and your opponent still has too much health. You can't really do anything. You might have to reload before you can even swap to your secondary if you didn't put the enemy at enough of a disadvantage. Be honest with yourself. Not to me, just to yourself. How is your hip firing? And your ability to one-clip someone? How often does it happen? If you're not running SMGs most of the time, you may benefit from hip firing with assault rifles to deal more damage for the shots that you're actually hitting. In some endgame circles, I curse myself for having 2 SMGs when it's a long-range fight. You can't know how the ring is going to end every time, so sometimes you get trapped in this. If my teammates are using mid-range to long-range weapons, and one of them gets knocked, say when it's the last 2 teams, I can't even properly provide supporting cover, because that enemy team's going to rush us, as they should. If I could crack one with a longbow, or if I had a hemlock with a 3x scope on it, I could fend them off and at least put them on the defensive, so I could get off a revive and maybe still win the game. Just consider how SMGs play into your full game, not just close range engagements. In my personal opinion, having an assault rifle or a sniper rifle and then an SMG in the back pocket is a great loadout, and it gives you plenty of versatility with the right scopes. Before we're done here, the alternator is a mixture between an assault rifle and an SMG. Not really, it's classified as an SMG, but if you use one, that's what it's going to feel like. The accuracy and recoil is great, but it has a slower RPM. However, it deals a lot of damage per hit. If you ever do run dual SMGs, use it 2x on the alternator for accuracy, and you can use it mid-range with a little bit of recoil control, and then keep a different SMG in the back pocket so that you have it for close range fights. In Season 8, the Spitfire is basically what everyone complained about. I don't know when you're watching this, but if you weren't around during the huge phase of complaining, you lucked out. LMGs are meant to be taken as a serious threat, but this again comes down to the statistics I told you about earlier. In terms of recoil, you get it bad with the current LMGs in the lineup of Apex Legends. The Devotion and the L-Star have hard to control recoil, and while the Spitfire is easier than them, you can still get some randomness in hip firing fights. The main thing you need to keep in mind with LMGs is that you can wipe a team, or at least put them on the defensive if you just empty a clip and deal enough damage. LMGs are usually recommended for newer players, or those with a lower gun skill level, but I disagree. I think that if you can hip fire with a Spitfire or a Devotion, you're at least an average or partially good player. The recoil is hard to control, and close range, you suffer from one of the slowest move speeds in the game, which is usually a negative 60% move speed. I don't have the specific guns up in front of me. I want to say the L-Star is 50% instead of 60, but we'll get into that later. That's a big thing to consider. LMGs are best at mid-range, so a Spitfire with a 3x is surprisingly good. It's basically going to replace the functionality of assault rifles that I talked about earlier. Speaking of which, if you have discerned for yourself at this point in the video that you A, do not feel comfortable with hip firing, or B, don't hit as many shots as you want in close range, that's where LMGs can help. With some practice and putting yourself out there, the risk of hitting your shots with LMGs in close range outweighs the downsides more often than not, because you're not getting hit with the full reload times from assault rifles fairly often in a fight. A Spitfire's RPM, damage output, and accuracy means that you can keep hitting a team while they're trying to rush you, and you may even surprise yourself. Learn it mid-range so that you can utilize it close range. Time to talk about sniper rifles. I'm gonna make this one as short and sweet as I possibly can. I personally love sniping, at least in Apex Legends. Not in other games, but here it's pretty good. There's immense satisfaction to be had from landing a sentinel headshot or downing an opponent with a few well-placed longbow shots from a far distance. But there is a skill ceiling here. Sniper rifles have their difficulties, because if you're not hitting your shots, you just have a big doorstop as a secondary weapon. Snipers are actually really good in close range combat if you have a level 3 sniper stock and can essentially quickscope, without a long-range scope on it. These shine best for players who don't like their chances in close-range environments. You're going to need a close-range gun no matter what, because it's rare that you'll win a fight against a full team just with long-range fighting, especially if it's the last 2 teams. But in endgame circles, sniping can be powerful enough to make someone waste heals or get trapped in a compromising position at the edge of a late stage ring where they can't run into the ring to reposition because it'll kill them. Basically what I'm saying is that sniping is mostly situational. If you aren't good with your close range fights, that is, within a 10-meter range of your opponent, sniping is a great way to bridge the gap. If you can break shields with a sniper, you can turn your enemy on the defensive. You can rush them with your secondary and not have to hit as many shots on them to seal the deal. If you're hitting half your shots, but you broke them first with a good sentinel shot, that's all you need. Since Apex Legends is a team-based game, this will also help you to support your team. If you can consistently land sniper shots and break shields, you can help take a good percentage off of the enemy's total combined shields, and your close-range capable teammates can hit them where it hurts. You can be a great support even if you're not up close and personal in those gunfights. It's boomstick time. It's rare that I use shotguns, and it's because they fit very specific playstyles. If your only goal is to get close range, that's fine, that's how you play. These work best for high-risk, high-reward gameplay styles. If that's what you're seeking, rock on. If you can hit your shots dead center so that all of the pellets are landing, or at least most of them are, then you're gonna be fine. But even as someone who loves single-fire weapons, shotguns don't really fit into my preferred loadouts most of the time. I'm not gonna hit as many dead center shots as I would personally like to. We saw an overpowered Peacekeeper on the floor loot in the past, then the Mastiff, and I think they're one of the hardest things to balance. You're gonna have days where you're hitting 14 with an EVA 8, or you're gonna knock 63 damage into full body shots every single time. In my experience, there's rarely an in-between. It seems like you either hit or you miss, figuratively speaking. But now this comes down to you. Do you like up-close and personal fights? Are you willing to dip and dodge around sniper fire to get closer to an enemy's position even if they're trying to suppress you? Are you playing a legend that thrives in close-quarter combat like Bangalore or Octane? If so, shotguns are probably worth getting good with. The EVA 8 has been consistent. At the time of recording this, at the end of Season 8, there's an unconfirmed rumor that the Peacekeeper is coming back to the floor loot. If so, that will probably end up being the best to choose, but for now, the EVA 8 is where it's at. Last but not least, pistols. In most shooters, a pistol is something you get stuck with. In Apex Legends, pistols are something you get to choose. Every pistol in this game is viable for short game and even long game plays. The RE45 is good on its own, but with the quick draw attachment, it's better. The Wingman can use that attachment as well, and if you're anything short of a literal professional at this game, I would recommend using the quick draw holster over the skull piercer every day of the week. However, the Wingman does have a high skill ceiling to hit your shots, no matter what. The RE45 is like having a miniature R99 in your back pocket with less recoil. In fact, it's ridiculously easy to control. So you can have another automatic weapon with one of the smallest move speed reductions in the game sitting in your back pocket with a nice high RPM. For some context, it nearly matches the R301 in terms of speed, and it does more body damage than the R99. Although this is one instance where the guns are so similar in DPS that the RE45 and the R99, when they go toe-to-toe, the R99 is usually going to win as a better secondary. However, again, it comes down to you. The P2020 with hammer point rounds is perhaps one of the best things for newer players to have in their back pocket. I'm a fan of using the ever-risky longbow and then P2020 with hammer point combination. So I break shields and then finish them off with the hammer point rounds. If I'm lucky, I'll use that longbow and hit a skull piercer headshot, and it's an easy cleanup. You can pair the P2020 hammer point with just about any gun in the entire game, and it's incredibly valuable in just about every lineup. I would recommend the P2020 and the RE45 for newer players who aren't totally keen on how the guns work just yet, but if you have to have something in the back pocket, it should be one of these two. The P2020 without hammer points is useless at all levels of play. Casual, ranked, competitive, it's just not good. Only pick this up if you find the hammer point attachment first, and that is sitting in your backpack. Don't seek it out specifically and hold on to a weak gun in the hopes of RNG being kind to you. To recap everything, this is what I have to say. Use mid-range sights on your assault rifles. Be choosy with how you utilize SMGs, and use LMGs if you're willing to put in the time to get used to them and you want to deal a lot of damage at close range. Snipe if you're not good at close range fights. Choose shotguns if your ego allows it, and in the right situations, pistols can make all the difference. Be sure to check out the equipment guides on my channel or in the description below for more information on reducing reload times with the extended mags, stabilizers and how they affect your gameplay, and even where to prioritize putting high-level stocks. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something, and I hope that your next loadout is a wildly successful one. Let me know how it goes in the comments below, if you use this information, if you choose your loadout effectively, and then if you come back. I want to hear you boast about it. I want those victory stories. Drop them below.